We're on Facebook Live and Twitter with our post show. Continue our discussion about taking stock, Boston Public Schools, and students of color. And we welcome your questions. You want to add something, Millie? Oh, yeah. I thought you were following a thought after what we just said about just trying to gain back the trust of parents in this situation.
Well, I mean, I'm a Boston parent myself, so that definitely is an important decision for a parent to make. Making choices about what is the best school system for your child. What I like about Boston is that there are options that you can choose from. But I agree with Dr. Casillas. You have to make the public school option in your neighborhood one of the best ones available. I'm a social worker by trade, so I love anything grassroots, anything where I can stay in my own neighborhood, support and be involved in my own community, have my child walk to school and come back home safely. Those are all things that are very important to me as a parent. So I would love to see the neighborhood schools concept come back, the high quality of education, really be in every single school in Boston, so that parents can feel like they can stay in their own neighborhood. But we have to be honest, parents also just have choices. Even if you have the best schools in your district, that doesn't mean that you're going to make that choice. But we should be able to make whatever choice you want, knowing that we're not missing out. Because even in the suburbs, we have suburban families who have a high performance school right in their backyard, but they still choose another school option for whatever reason. Either they want to be in a Catholic school, a religious school, a private, boarding school, or they want to go to their alma mater, because they're alumni at a specific location. So, I think it's our job to make sure that our city has the best education there, but also understanding that either way, people should have choices, and those choices should be good no matter which direction you go.
I did also want to pick up on something I know that you had said, that with regard to access about the exam schools, if you weren't in a system where you knew this, you would know that you're supposed to take the test in 6th grade, and a lot of parents have said they didn't know. So sometimes they've missed an opportunity. The kids have missed an opportunity to even take the test to try to qualify for these exam schools because of that not getting all the information.
And I would say even for immigrant families, even more so. I mean, that is something that, how do you understand or explain to people exam school when you come from another country, and that you have to do all these special steps in order to get there, that there's all these forms and preparation, and that you have to spend all this time, in line to get in that day to take the test and bring all kinds of documentation. I mean, it's quite a process, to go through that.
Right.
So for immigrant families, I think that's something that's very, very delicate. And if we really want them to be represented, we have to do a special effort to ensure that the immigrant families also know the process is there.
Facebook question is, do we really need exam schools? Can we just have good schools across the board?
That is where I wanted to go. Because it's, you can't just, we have 16,500 9th through 12th graders. You can't have just 3 schools. You need to have at least 10, 15 really high-powered, excellent schools. And so that's our next step, is really to create more comprehensive high schools that are really have the full breadth and rigor that would be equal to an exam school.
Curriculum based, or what would they be?
Well, we're working through that now. So I don't want to get ahead of the planning, but they'd have advanced courses, many advanced courses, early college opportunities, career pathways, athletics, co-curricular performance opportunities, art opportunities, well-rounded wellness programs for children. So that's what we would, just what you think of, with rich, beautiful, comprehensive programming for students.
I know in 2016 when there was when the controversy restarted, if you will. There's always been controversy over the exam schools, but 2016, 2017. Black and Latino students basically brought it to the fore once again. And one of the issues that was addressed at the time for consideration was the notion of using the so-called Texas model, taking the top.
The meritocracy.
That's right.
Yeah.
This whole notion, this attempt at meritocracy, at least,
Right.
of taking the top 10% of students at every school, a feeder school, into the exam school system. I'm not sure where that went. I know it was considered, and it's something you don't seem to be.
No, I'm more of if you create positive, high-quality programs,
Right.
then
Across the board.
Then you have heterogeneous groupings of students. Just as you would have integrated schools, you need heterogeneous groupings of students. And I think that that's something that I've always seen in my 31 years of being an educator is very positive. I've not been one to track kids or to plug them over in the Bluebird group or this group or that group. I believe in inclusionary practices for our students with disabilities. I believe in bilingual education. So I think that there's, the more you can have children interacting in heterogeneous groupings, the better, I think, in the educational environment.
Makes sense.
We had a Facebook question about exactly how much will schools get under this new school funding. So I should say, to lead into you, it depends.
It's the Promise Act, right? So it has the word right in it, promise. Every year they have to react on the act to get the funding. It's not automatic. So it's dependent on the receipts that come in. And so, it's not ongoing funding. And so I think that that's going to require the public to pay attention and to stay active, to continue to talk to their legislators about re-upping the funding. And so that's, concerning obviously to us as I have to make the budget every year. I want to make sure that there's assurances on the funding that's going to be coming in. And so, this has been an incredible Herculean effort to get this passed, and it's good. It's just now we have to realize the promise. $100 million over 7 years, you can do the math. It's about $14 million per year that builds. Additional until you get to that 7th year where you would be getting hopefully $100 million annually, and so that would help. But Boston Public School budget is $1.4 billion, so I mean you can see that it's not a large percentage, but it's substantial enough, especially if every single dollar would go towards students. You could do some stuff with that, and you could really move achievement, I believe, if this does pass and if they start to make these investments. But even Mayor Walsh has made bigger investments in the schools than what is promised in this, but this is going to help get the ball rolling, and it's going to help the city.
Just for point of clarity, because all of you have said, emphasized the money should go towards students. Where else would it go?
I think that we need, in order to have more access to AP courses, for example, we need to have a dynamic, multicultural teaching force.
Got it.
We need black teachers. The research is very clear. Johns Hopkins American University says that black teachers are good for black students in terms of attaining higher academic outcomes, especially in those developmental years in the early grades, 3 to 5. But black teachers are good for all students, and all students preferred black teachers according to this watershed study. And so black teachers referred students to AP courses on a higher level. Students had aspirations to go to college. Black boys, specifically, the dropout rate reduced by 39%, and for black girls it was 29%. So we really need to look at all of the formulas that we know coming from the research that are critically important to ensure that we have rigor, that students have access to AP courses. We need to change the mindset in the district, and we need to move away from the deficit model of thinking about our black and brown students. We need to understand what students bring to the classroom. And looking at special ed again, for Latino students, we need to know their ELD level and not presuppose that language difference is language disability. But we also need to focus on understanding when students who are bilingual require special education. So we need bilingual psychologists who share the culture of these students and who understand, who that student is. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. We need professional development that's job embedded. If we are going to get to that place of rigor that is continuous. And we also need coaching support for teachers. We need PLCs.
Does the promise, does this particular legislation promise more counselors? More, because I think.
Well, I'm not tying it to that funding.
Right, you're talking about the broader.
I'm talking about, we
What
have.
schools districts are
I'm
doing
talking
with
about
the
what we need in terms of a dynamic teaching force that is going
That's
to
right.
move the needle
Right.
towards accelerated learning and outcomes for all students.
That has been an issue of trying to hire a diverse a staff of teachers, not only here but in other places as well. I mean, what can
we
Boston
need to
do better?
look at why black teachers are leaving, and that goes to retention. So
So beyond retirement.
beyond
Beyond getting them in, you still need to
the retention
keep them
piece
here.
has to do
That's
with,
right.
sometimes black teachers are isolated. They don't get the support. They're viewed as the gatekeeper for discipline. They may not be looked at as content specialists, and they're given the most difficult students. They may be in schools that don't have resources, and so it's a lot for beginning black teachers. We need to look at highly qualified black teachers who are exiting the district and why they're exiting, and then we need to change that.
Yes.
And so when they come, they're at the low end of the salary, they're using their funding in order to get supplies, but also they are taking on extra responsibilities and often take on the most difficult students because everyone thinks they're better at classroom management. So we have to stop burdening our black teachers with for example, the expert of knowing all the black students in the class. We need to get to culturally responsive pedagogy, like Gloria Ladson's Billing said, and really define what are culturally and linguistically sustainable practices that all teachers need to know, and have a system of support to make sure that all teachers know how to interact with students. We need to stop suspending black boys when there's a conversation that could be had, or there could be some kind of inquiry of, well, why did you do that? Let's talk about that. So we need to have those kinds of elements if we're going to improve the outcomes for all students.
So, Boston Public Schools, a couple of things. One, every high school has their own graduation requirements. So there's no set standard for what students should know and be able to do when they leave. So we have to take care of that piece
That's a big problem.
by adopting the Mass Core. That's a recommendation I plan on bringing forward. From there, you have to do what Edith says, which you'll be happy to know we're working on, is the curricular frameworks that are aligned to high rigor. And what does that mean? Aligned to culturally, linguistically sustaining practices, meaning that they are reflective of the students. The curriculum is reflective of the students' backgrounds and heritage and linguistic differences. And also within that, you're using universal design so that you're able then to look at how are you preparing your lessons for different learning styles and students with differing disabilities within your classroom. So there's all of those pieces that need to be put together in frameworks for teachers, and then professional development for deep professional development for teachers, heavy coaching that has to happen. And so that's how you get to better teaching and learning in the classroom.
I want to just revisit, because all of you have mentioned the
And accountability.
the importance of making sure that the rigor is there for the students in terms of content. And one of the series that the Boston Globe did was about the group of valedictorians. Who, now these are students who are at the top of their class. They've done everything against great odds, many of them, sometimes learning language, English, and then rising to the top. And yet, when they got on the other side, many of them were not prepared. And some of the critics reading that series said it's not enough rigor. So is that you're saying you're going to address it, but is that acknowledged everywhere? I mean, is that
I
understood?
think it's more than that. It's
exactly.
more
I
than
think
that.
it's
So
rigor.
I think if you're talking about, some students who have done very, very well get to college and then they fall apart. that's where you need guidance counselors. That's where you need dual enrollment. That's where you need students in high school taking college courses, doing internships on the college campus. That is critical, so that students understand, when do I have to have my deposit? How do I get financial aid? How do I apply for scholarships? What do I do to get support when I'm overwhelmed? So that dual, having partnerships with colleges and universities that have great programs. They have to have high quality programs while students are in high school. And that does happen in Boston. It needs to be expanded so that students are gaining college credit that is transferable. And it happens in some districts where by the time they graduate, they may have enough to move towards getting an associate's degree.
But you also have a situation, of course, where there's something under-resourced.
That's
Once they leave high school, they arrive in a college situation, regardless of tuition that may be paid, regardless of room and board, they still find themselves extremely under-resourced in some of these colleges where it's just the cost of living is just so high. But I'm thinking also of efforts to address that, and I was thinking of an effort by the principal. I think she's still the principal at the Jeremiah Burke.
Linda?
I stole
She's
her.
gone.
Oh, is that right? Did you sell her?
She's now high school superintendent.
Oh, is that right? Very smart. Very smart.
Those practices can continue with
Exactly.
someone else.
Amakar's there now.
The infrastructure is there.
Right?
The infrastructure's there, but major Herculean efforts to address some of these issues in high school of very, with poor and working class students, and basically trying to prepare them, and also looking for those resources before they graduated, and hoping to find those resources, which is why those counselors are important, committed counselors. And why the very points that you've all made are so important. I mean, you must think about your own educational background. I think about my education all the time, and I think that if not for certain teachers, I would not be sitting in this chair right now. If not, and I'm talking about black and white teachers, and I'm talking about a counselor who was basically dedicated. And because one counselor had never even mentioned the word college to me throughout high school, it was a fluke that I found another, in the last month of high school, who even used the word, uttered the word college. It was a huge dynamic change. The very points that you're making.
Millie?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I would like to add to that is that. It's not just about the academic rigor. That's very, very important. But when you're talking about the whole child and what's happening beyond the classroom, that's why some people are not succeeding when they leave. And I've been looking into the K through 16 model, that I believe there's an opportunity for us to continue following the child more like what Edith said, like after they leave, who else is keeping track of when financial aid applications are due, who's sending them scholarship opportunities, who's sending them even care packages to let them know I'm here for you, who is providing internships and job opportunities for these students so that when they come back they can to their home, they can have a job so they can make the money that they need to go back. A lot of students, even if they go to high performing suburban schools and they're students of color from impoverished communities, they sometimes still don't make it. So it's not just about the academics. If you're dealing with a social climate and a social situation of their environment, that there's some poverty at home, there's abuse, there's neglect, there's lack of food, there's a parent who has to work, there's a parentified child who has to take care of their siblings, which that was the case for me. I was the one that went into the parent-teacher conferences. I was the one that dropped off my sisters to daycare and to school and picked them up. I was the one at home doing the dinner when my mother was going to college to try to learn how to speak English. So, there's all these things that you have to overcome, and if you don't find that teacher that believes in you, and for me, it was my art teacher, and that Miss Malone. I wish I went back, but after I left Lynn, I've never been back. But I wish I could go back and let her know that she believed so much in me. She welcomed me, and because of that experience, I was able to actually go to a high-performing college. But it was because somebody was looking out for me and leading the way. But beyond that, someone has to be there, and I had a full scholarship. So someone actually ensured that I finished my education when I was leaving my high school. But that doesn't happen for everybody. So I think we need to start looking into the K through 16 model, where there's counselors that stay behind, following up with the alumni and ensuring that we don't that no child is left behind and that they actually finish their education. And that's something that I'm looking into for the MECO program. Like, after we graduate our students, how do we ensure that they actually finish?
Yes,
The
that's
nice
important.
thing, the nice thing about a K-16 model is that it also enlists the help of the higher ed partners to help you, and they know the children earlier. Before they get to their institutions, and they do those exchanges, so kids know how to register, they know how to get online, how to submit their homework, how to navigate the lunch line when they go, or how to sign up for a dorm. It's amazing how many times children they think that applying to college is, oh, that's all I have to do is apply to college. No, you have to be there are fees you have to pay, and there are sometimes when they have to pay the fee to live in the dorm, the fee to get your books, the fee to get your ID, the fee to get, and all of these things are every single time. That is a stumbling block for a kid that hasn't been taught agency, that hasn't been taught that. If someone tells you no, you ask them,
another way to go.
How do I get around, right? And so you have to help kids cope and how to persevere and to continue to advocate for themselves.
And we're going to leave it right there. That's a great place to end. I want to thank all of you for joining me. Thanks, Philip. Thanks, Millie.
Thank
Thanks,
you, Kelly.
Superintendent
Thank you so
Brenda.
much.
And thank you very much, Edith.
Thank you.